Hello and welcome to my brand new podcast. I'm Nicky Raby and I'm thrilled that you're joining us. I do lots of things. I'm an actor, coach, writer, speaker and a mum. And in my coaching work, I work with creatives, personal brands, freelancers and small businesses. In this podcast, I want to talk about success, but not in the traditional sense. I want to bring you conversations that discuss success, what it means, and how there are many different versions. We're going to be talking about business, branding, becoming visible, saying no, saying yes, and how you can create a thriving portfolio career doing more of what you love and less of what you don't. Sometimes there can be a certain mystery around the online world, so I'm going to be asking my guests how they started and grew, how they get paid, how they stand out, and how they create success on their terms. As always, please check the show notes for all things we mention and come and say hi over on social media at Nicky Raby or via my website nickyraby.com/podcast. In today's episode, I'm talking to Monica Kade, who is a writer and communication consultant. She is highly sought after for her work with entrepreneurs, which helps them to find clarity, fine-tune and express their personal business message. She has over 12 years in communications and publishing, and through her work, she supports people to express themselves as communicators professionally and personally. And her offerings include masterclasses, one-on-one sessions, and copywriting. I loved chatting to Monica, and I really hope you enjoyed the episode too. Hi Monica, how are you?
I'm doing really well, thanks, Nikki. How about yourself?
Yeah, really well, thank you. Well, we have snow here in London, but in Sydney, probably not so much.
No, we actually just had 2 rainy days, which was beautiful. And then today the heat has come back and it's really warm. So no, it's a nice balmy evening with cicadas in the background. And I live by the ocean, so you've got that too.
I'm
quite the opposite.
so jealous. All the Brits over here are so cross. Well, some people love it, but from their cozy fires. But everybody can't get to work and everybody's very stressed. And anyway, so if people don't know you, I would love just to start by hearing more about what you do and your business.
Yeah, sure. So ultimately, I am a writer and a communication specialist. And under this umbrella, I do a lot of writing with clients on their businesses or their personal stories, their LinkedIn bios. And then I also run communication masterclasses. So that can be on public speaking, it can be on presenting and those kinds of things. So everything that I do is about helping people express themselves better. And I also work with them individually in one-to-one sessions where we really find their voice, or we put a voice to their dream and really help them develop what their message is and really get it crystal clear. Because I think for people when they're starting out with, something that they're super passionate about, a new business or a new idea, sometimes, when you're trying to do it by yourself, you get a little bit stuck. So my role is to then help them find that voice and bring that dream to fruition with them.
Absolutely. I feel like sometimes you can have all the ideas and you can look at it objectively and sort of have that bird's eye view of what it looks like. But as soon as you have to put yourself into the mix and ultimately sell you and what you do, that brings up all kinds of hidden gems, hidden lessons that you may not have thought about. What do people want to talk about you, or what is often underlying this point of being able to present themselves?
2 things stand out immediately. One is confidence, and the second is I don't want to talk about myself.
Right.
And I find that the confidence part is it's so common in the speaking, like when it comes to public speaking, or even sometimes when people are putting their businesses forward, they lack this confidence and belief in themselves. And I often, when I first started seeing it more and more, I was just observing it. I thought, gosh, isn't it fascinating? Everyone thinks everyone around them has it together, but yet everyone is coming into this group right now and everyone is feeling the same feeling and they're lacking that confidence, and yet they're all amazing people in their own right and they're all successful in their own right. And so I thought that was really fascinating. And I remember in a particular workshop I pointed it out to them, and I think it really hit home, because everyone's always looking around at everybody else.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the lack of confidence comes from. The moment we take our attention off ourselves and put it onto everyone around us and try to measure up against everyone else, well, then we've lost touch with who we really are and what we really want. We're focusing on, okay, well, how can I be more like someone else? But that's not who we are. So my job is to help people come back to themselves and connect to who they are. And then we kind of work on the confidence aspect from that perspective. And then in terms of the I don't want to talk about myself part, that's also quite common. I don't know what it's like in the UK, but in Australia we have like this tall poppy syndrome where, people, they just want to cut each other down, or you don't want to encourage the growth of other people because of jealousy or envy or whatever it is that people, don't like about it. But that's something I notice. And I think what I've realized with working with people, and even for myself personally, it's if you've got this dream that's like this burning desire inside of you, you have to get it out. And it's not pretentious or being into yourself sharing your message, because if you think about a friend or just someone close to you that's super passionate about something and they're talking to you about it and you can see how much it lights them up, you kind of feel inspired by that too.
Yes.
And so if we're to approach our businesses and our messages and whatever it is that we're sharing from that perspective, like, it's not that you're doing shameless self-promotion. It's just like you're like, hey, I've got something really cool and I want to tell you about it. So that's kind of the shift I like to put on to that angle.
Absolutely. And I feel like storytelling is so key to that, because everybody, and I think maybe this is where the lack of confidence comes from, or comparison, is that we are on social media a lot. Well, I am. And we see what's happening with other people's lives. We see the new kitchen that somebody's putting in, or the event that they've been to, or an award that they've had for their business. We're seeing it live because people are sharing it. But I think also just really tapping into who you are is so key. So if somebody was going to do that practically, how would they start to close down the noise of, let me focus on myself?
The way that I encourage people to do it is to really become aware of the thoughts in their mind first. So I think through awareness, that's the first step. Because if we're not aware, then we have no idea what's going on, and we're just reactive to what is happening.
Yeah. So
if we can just become aware that, oh, okay, I feel that I don't feel very confident, and I notice I keep comparing myself to Sally down the road, or, this social media account. When you catch yourself, just recognize it. Be like, oh, okay, I'm aware I'm embarking in this comparison game, or I can see here that I'm feeling a lack of self-confidence because I'm comparing myself to somebody else. And the moment you catch yourself out, that immediately will start to fade away. It probably won't go away straight away. You might still engage in those thoughts or, in certain actions, but the more you observe those thoughts and catch yourself out, you begin to separate yourself from them, and you become like the observer, and you can just watch them, be like, okay, I don't have to believe that. And you can just, the thought can go away as quickly as it came, and it doesn't, over time, what will happen is that you don't react in the same way. And that's probably a good measure as to know whether you've moved through something. So like, if you catch yourself looking at a particular Instagram account and you don't respond in the same way, or you might not feel the same emotion you used to feel when you looked at that particular account, then you can see for yourself that you've grown and you have more space, and you no longer are, focusing on that particular thought pattern anymore.
Absolutely. And I think it's knowing what your own kind of triggers are. And I think there's certainly times of day where, if I find myself working past 9 or 10 o'clock, that I know that I'm not in the right headspace to be making progress. And I know that I'm not bringing my all to the table. And when I know that I'm slightly depleted as well, that's when those thoughts or insecurities or self-doubt or can you really do this sort of come out to play. And so knowing your own patterns can be really helpful as well. How did you start your business? How did you know that this niche was going to be something that you wanted to follow?
It's so funny. It's evolved over time. It hasn't, I never started out going, okay, I'm going to create this business where I'm going to cover all things communication and assist people with helping them fine-tune their message and become better communicators. That was never what I went into it. I was always writing, like whether that was contracting for companies or working in publishing, and I guess I've always been interested in people's stories. Like that's been a huge theme. And when I was younger, I started my own magazine, online magazine as well. And so there's always been, those little links to it. And I've always been connected to writing. And I think over time, as you start to evolve and get to know yourself more, you start recognizing the parts of what you love doing and the parts that you don't particularly like. And then I think the more you get to know yourself, not just in a business way, but know yourself as a human being. And I think you start to kind of become more and more clear about what it is that this little voice inside of you, this dream is, and that what you want to bring to the world. So that's kind of how it happened for me.
Definitely. And how did you give yourself permission to listen to that intuition? Because I have a lot of clients that will say things like, is it okay to feel like this? Or I feel like this is the right direction, but what will people think? Or how did you know to keep going and to accelerate in that area?
I think, how did I know? I know that I've always been quite attuned to my own intuitive voice. So I've recognized that. Doesn't mean that I've always followed it over the years, but I think...
Yeah, I only have to look at my dating history. I'm like, no, that was never going to be the case. Yes.
That's so funny. But I think it's more about, it's not about whether you follow it or not. It's just that you recognize that there's this feeling taking you in a direction. And I find that even if you take like a little detour, it appears as a detour, but if you're supposed to go back in a different direction, you somehow end up there. Oh yeah. So back to the question, when you were saying about your clients saying, is it okay? It's so funny how we ask other people if it's okay to follow the dream that's in our heart, when it's like, but how are they supposed to know? You're the one that feels it. You're the one that sees it. No one can see or feel the dream that you do. So it's like it's happening for you, and it's happening because this is this feeling inside of you that you're here to express, and no one else can express it. Only you can. So of course it's okay. Give yourself that permission, and then I think that's the most critical point. Give yourself permission. And to be honest, I think for myself, I've been quite blessed in the sense my dad was always very encouraging. He's like, you can do whatever it is that you want to do. And I think I've always had that mindset too. So I just kept trying things, and I failed a lot, and I still do to this day. Like sometimes I'm like, what did you do that for?
Yes. Again? Really, Nikki?
Yeah.
Come on. What do you, yeah. But the fact that you can have that lightheartedness of like, we're not going to make it perfect every time. We're not going to get it immediately. It's, yeah, it's always a work in progress.
Yeah.
My mum was a teacher, and she would always say that thing of like, show me the boy at 7 and I'll show you the man, or whatever the phrase is. And I recently had to do this with my own coach, or of like going back and looking at the younger version of myself and trying to tap in to that younger wisdom in a way. And we spoke a little bit before we started recording about acting and things like that. And I remember looking back at that 7-year-old version of me, and she, although I was quite quiet and sort of kept my head down and things like that, I was quite sassy in the way that I was making big life decisions of the fact that I wanted to be an actor, but I didn't know any actors, and the people around me weren't necessarily forthcoming with information because they didn't know it. And I suddenly had this thing of like, well, I'm going to figure it out myself, and off I go. And we didn't have the internet or anything like that. How important have you found message and story to be in terms of accelerating your business?
I think it's really important. I think the way that you communicate yourself in the world is what's going to attract your tribe, so to speak. However, your language is all that we have, especially over the internet. You've got a bunch of words to communicate who you are. So you want to do that really well. And I think adding story in is really important because it allows people to see the real you, because on a screen, your personality doesn't come through. So you have to find a way of capturing that. So whether that's through words or like now a video or audios, I think stories help people connect with who you truly are. And that's when they want to work with you, because they either feel like, oh, I really feel like this person could help me with where I want to go. Or maybe you've had a similar experience. Maybe you've gone through a life, some sort of big trauma or a big challenge, and your experience through that can help other people who are now going through the same thing. I think we're all in this life together and we can all support each other. And I think we do that very much through stories. So that's how I found, for me, it's been really beneficial.
Fantastic. And I'd love to talk a bit more about life as an entrepreneur and for you putting yourself out there and becoming visible. How do you practically manage your week, and how do you find that balance of growing but also being in your business?
I think it's really important. Like for me, it's always about starting my day right. It's important for me to make sure that I'm connected to myself. So the way that I do that, it's making sure that I'm exercising, whatever that is on that particular day. And I love being in nature. I love being by the ocean, which is why I live by the ocean, because I know that I'm a better person when I'm by the water.
Yes.
And so when I'm setting myself up in that capacity, that's already like the foundation for good things to happen. And then I guess I do structure my days. I mean, I think the beautiful thing is like I don't have to work 9 to 5. So, I can, my days are flexible, but I always like to write down what it is that I'm going to get done. And then I think if I'm working on myself and doing the things that fill me up personally, then when I step into my business, then I'm stepping into it from a place of being full. And so whatever that it demands from me, then hopefully, not always, sometimes, I mean, there are times that I don't, but most of the time then I can deliver what I need to, because I'm not coming from a place of emptiness or really being tired or something like that.
And did that take you a long time to figure out?
Oh, yeah, I've had a few like burnouts along the way. And each time I've
ugly cries on the kitchen floor.
Yeah, and you just think, this isn't worth it. I'm doing this again. Why am I here? Yeah. And for me, like I know for me how stress manifests is in the top of my back, like the top middle of my back. So anytime I start feeling that, I recognize it now. I'm like, okay, you're not calm. You're under some sort of stress because your body's reacting and it's telling you. But in the past, I would just work constantly. I'd like work long hours and I'd put in a lot of energy to projects. I remember when I was working in publishing, like we had deadlines, so I'd give it everything and I'd stress that it may not come on deadline. And then I had a bit of burnout, and my friend pointed out to me one time, she's like, it's not worth it. And in that moment where she told me, because I was under pressure and I was under a deadline, I didn't really recognize it. But then afterwards, it kind of hit home, and I realized all that it doesn't matter. Like, okay, if you don't meet a deadline, what is the worst thing that is absolutely going to happen? The world is not going to fall apart. Like, it just isn't. And, there may be consequences depending on what job people are in, but in the grand scheme of things, you have to look after yourself. Like, putting yourself under that kind of stress is just not worth it.
No, and I feel like, again, it's something that I've had to learn over time, is being available to everybody at all times. It's like having your computer on the whole time, and your computer after a while is going to go, I'm just going to collapse one day, or I'm just going to do some weird fuzzy thing that you're going to be perplexed by. And you want to not just emulate what you would do in a corporate role, but actually figure it out for yourself of how you can sustain it and how you can grow in a way that's good to you. And in this world of personal development and self-development and business development, how do you, even though with the kind of positive mindset, how do you pull yourself out of those moments when you just like, nothing seems to be, well, I don't know if you have those, maybe, I know I certainly have done over the times where you're like, nothing's working, or this seems hard, or, I'll be completely honest, over the last couple of weeks, I've just had a really bizarre run of bad luck. And I think it's important to share that sometimes, because even though you're putting out all the things and you're doing all the right things, for some reason sometimes things don't go your way. So I has suddenly had a few clients go, actually it's not going to be this month, it's going to be next month. Or I had a blog go out to 12,000 people and the link was written wrong, and you're just like, oh, this is so frustrating. But I guess how do you pull yourself out in that when those moments sort of go a bit AWOL?
Look, it totally will depend on how large a challenge it is, because I can relate totally. Like, I recently had a very similar thing to you, where I went through a stint where things that previously worked didn't work, and I was like, what is going on? Like, this is really weird. I don't understand it. And it's stressful because I'm like, what am I doing wrong? And
because it's emotional as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's not the right approach. In being able to look back on it, it's like making ourselves wrong means that it just puts like the wrong energy onto it. I think you've just got to recognize, okay, well, this isn't working. So what is it that I can do right now? And whenever I start to feel overwhelmed, or if I feel like I'm going through a really hard time and I need to somehow pull myself out, I just stop myself and I say, okay, what's the next step? What's the first step to take here? And then I come back to this moment, because a lot of the time those challenges can become bigger than Ben-Hur, because they snowball in your mind. So you start at one point and then you make up this story that probably doesn't even exist in your head and create more stress. So I'm always in stressful moments, not just in business, but even in life, I'm bringing myself to, like, if I don't know the answer, I go, okay, well, what's the next step? Just take the first step. But that, like, yes, that works. However, I'm not saying that it's effortless either. Like, sometimes that really works well. Sometimes that can still be challenging. And I think what's really important is to make sure that you're feeling whatever the emotions are. Don't try to get rid of them, because they're coming up for a purpose. And if we avoid them, then we're just either pushing them down or pretending that they're not happening, but they're rising for a reason. And we all come out the other side. We all know when we come out the other side, and we're like, oh, thank God, that's done.
And if you don't deal with them, they come back, but they're in a different outfit, and you're like, it's still you, but you're doing this, and you're trying to trick me, but we're in this game again. This is annoying.
Spot on. It's exactly right. So yeah, they're my two recommendations. Make sure you feel everything to the degree that it shows up, and then just take one step at a time.
So good, so good. Have there been any books that have just been so useful for you, or those books on your shelf that you're like, okay, I'm pulling you out again, there's going to be something that's going to help here?
So actually, yesterday, because I was on a little holiday last week, and then I came back and I had my brother staying with me, and then he left, and you know that moment where, well, I don't know if you had that moment because you have a little child, but where it's like peaceful and quiet. I was like, yes. I'm going to sit down and read a book.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I do have that moment. Sometimes Matt will take him out. My partner will take him out. Like, we're just going to go to the park. I'm like, great, finally I can get on with some work. But then I find myself just staring gormlessly into space for 10 minutes, just going, because I think that, you know, even those sort of moments that you don't necessarily need those big retreats or the trip to Bali or whatever, you know, those are all lovely, but sometimes it's just those little moments in the day of like, just to read a book or relax. Anyway, what sorry, you were saying?
Yeah, so I just finished reading, it's called Money, A Love Story by Kate Northrup, and it's actually brilliant. Like, I'm a bit reluctant when it comes to I love reading, but I'm quite particular with what I like to read. I like to read about people's stories, and I'm very particular about, I don't know if you call it self-help, but whatever you want to call it, self-growth, all those kinds of things. You know, I think there are so many people out there doing amazing things, and then there's also a lot of people that are just talking and they don't live what they talk about. So anyway, I came across her book somehow, and then I read it, and it was a really great book. Like, it was very insightful, and I learned different things about myself. So that's one that I highly recommend. And then one that I always come back to, I've read it quite a few times, is Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. That's a beautiful book. That, I guess, reiterates what I was talking about before, you know, just take the first step, because we can only go moment by moment. So that's a nice, it's not a business book, but yeah, it's a great book.
Yes. And actually, I think there is such pressure these days to have the Facebook ads or the sales funnels or the 3-part video, whatever. But actually, if you're not in the right headspace and you're not working with the right mindset, that sort of stuff is going to slow you down anyway. So, you know, you have to work the strategy and the mindset as well. What would you say to your teenage self looking back?
Ooh, how
everybody always does that, like, do they? Because there's such love and empathy. I always find that, you know, teenage girl issues is, it's full on.
Yeah, I think it would be to just be kinder to myself. I think I was really mean to myself internally, and the dialogue that I had, and I think a lot of people are. I think, you know, the self-talk can be quite brutal sometimes, but I know for me, I think I had a lot of expectation on myself, and I feel like now I've relaxed way more, and, you know, sometimes I still don't speak to myself nicely, but I'm more aware of it, whereas then it was just, I would say just be kinder.
The pressure at that age is, and if there are any teenagers like listening, don't worry, it's all going to be fine. And I hate the pressure that school puts you under, thinking you've got to have it all figured out now. And I've done a few coaching clinics at universities or you know, done talks and presentations, and the amount of times where people will say, like, I just need to figure out what I'm going to do with my life, and I go, love, we've only got half an hour, so I'll do my best. But we may not get to, you know, 40 plus. We may get to the next 6 months. But I think it's that thing of, like, you're not going to know the whole plan, and taking that next step is so important. Yes.
I think you're totally right. There's too much pressure on what it is that you're supposed to do with your life. And the truth is, you can do whatever you want. There's no supposed to. Just you can decide. But I think we evolve so much as we come into being adults that knowing, you can't possibly know. I mean, I'm sure there are some people that know, you know, there are some people that just knew from when they were tiny little kids. But for the most part, you know, we travel, we meet new people, we have new interests, we learn more about ourselves. And I don't think that there's like you're going to know the answer at that time. So yes,
and
if you are listening,
have been invented yet. I think this is
exactly.
the thing. Is like at school we were in the library hammering on these old computers. And, you'd want to go and use you'd have a 5-minute slot, and then there would only be one person in the entire school who knew how to turn the computer on. So it's like, well, it's not going to happen today. And my son now watches telly on my iPhone, and who knows what's going to be available for him in the coming years. It's and just being kind. Oh, it's so true. And as a final question, where would you like to be in 5 years' time in business and life? Just a small question.
I would love to. So one of my big dreams is to have a beautiful big beachfront home. That's something like I've always known that I've wanted to have ever since I was young, and it's just so I would love that in 5 years' time. And career-wise, I would have liked to have written a couple of books. So I think that's a good start.
Yes, that will keep you busy. That sounds great. And I can, we're coming, a lot of our listeners are from the UK, so, we can totally tap into that dream after many episodes of Neighbours and Home and Away. I think it was huger here than it was in Australia, but yeah, we all lost our minds a bit when that was our childhood. And I think I actually did cry on the living room floor when Henry Ramsey left for Brisbane. It was emotional, but
so funny. Yes, I actually live a few, I don't know how many beaches it is, like 10 beaches down from where they film that Home and Away.
Wow.
Because they shoot at Palm Beach, so I live on that Northern Beaches stretch.
Oh my goodness. Who knew? Hey, amazing. So if people want to find out more about you and listen to your podcast, where's the best place for people to go?
You can head over to monicakade.com. So it's just Monica with a C and Kade with a K. And yes, you can just go check out my website. You can check out what services I offer if you think working with me would be fun or something up your alley. And there's also a link to my podcast there. So you can take a listen to people like we mentioned, like Lewis Howes. There's also Danielle Laporte and so many cool people that have been on. So yeah,
wonderful.
Check me out.
Check me out. Also, yes, absolutely. Monica, thank you. Thank you so much. I've been listening to the podcast for ages and it's fantastic. So please go and check out Monica, and thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I would love to hear what you thought of the episode and share any takeaways with me. Come and find me across social media at Nicky Raby, or you can visit the podcast page, nickyraby.com/podcast.